when it comes to marriage, and this, your train of conversation there started off kind of because I brought it back to marriage, is that what people who are Tradcons, traditional conservatives, is they fail to realize that the state you fail to realize that the state presides over your marriage, not your biblical values. So when the woman is unhappy, she's going to the state, not God. So even women who are godly and pious, even if you're a man and you're godly and pious, it is not a bulletproof path towards an everlasting marriage that is never subject to the negative ramifications of divorce.
And even without the paperwork, women can leave, right? If they're just not happy, if the marriage is not healthy, they can just leave, whether or not the man has any money for her to get from the divorce. So the problem is just that men and women, wives and husbands, need to understand each other. And thankfully, my husband and I stayed together because we learned the truth and we learned how to work through our problems, and we didn't divorce. And that's the whole reason why we do any of this stuff online, coaching and all of that, is because we learned some things the hard way, and we want to pass on what we learned because it saved our marriage. Does that make sense?
Well, and I mean, first off, I obviously want to congratulate you because it sounds like you have a good marriage, and I'm not saying that people can't have good marriages. I guess just my whole thing is that as a guy, it's not a risk. It's a risk, and I think Orion was making a really, really good point here. Is when the financial incentives are there for women to pursue a divorce, it could be like, it looks very tempting to just be like, you know what, I can get all this money. We're arguing, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let me just leave. I can get this money. If you put in front of somebody, okay, I can get paid $50,000 a year. Let's say your man's a high earner. He's going to pay some certain alimony payment. We've heard of astronomical alimony payments in the 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures. Look.
Well, I guess one of my points here is that this is a really high bar, and we don't see this in relationships in society very often. Like, what jobs do people that exist in the world where, like, no matter what, you cannot be removed from that position? Like Pope, like Supreme Court Justice, like, and those folks are vetted over decades of a career. And I'd like to think that what we've seen throughout most of human history is that when we give people a place where under no circumstances they can be removed, we see a tendency towards abuse.
Well, the Bible says that if there's adultery, it's grounds for divorce. If there's abuse and you're physically endangered, like you're in a life or death situation, you should separate. You know what I mean? And if it's not worked out, then but most people divorce before those things happen. And I think if women felt loved or whatever, and men felt respected in their marriage, they wouldn't get divorced. So it's not the money that wives are after. I don't believe that. I believe that they're seeking emotional, relational intimacy, and the problem is across the board. Wives and husbands are the problem. Wives and husbands can be the solution.
Well, I agree with you to a certain extent. I think that if a man feels respect and a woman feels loved, they're not going to leave the relationship. But that doesn't necessarily mean just because they feel loved or respected that they should get married.
But why not?
Well, because, again, why? Why is it that women catch the bouquet at weddings?
So they could get married next, right?
Exactly. Why isn't there anything equivalent about that for men? Ever.
Because it's different for men.
Exactly.
And men don't have to get married. It's more about a girl. Even in my culture.
Exactly. Marriage is about security for women.
In Hinduism.
That's right.
No,
culture,
marriage.
Indians, even with that, it's kind of similar to this, where it's once you get the arranged marriage, your parents set you up. And this is not even that long ago, but even my parents, they had no choice. They were set up, and it was a done deal. Okay? So it's yeah, that's basically it. But what I'm trying to say is for men, it's different. Men, they don't have to do that. It's not a death sentence.
Men want to marry because they want to procreate and they want sex and they want a woman. Like, that's just common
But all that was
knowledge.
happening before marriage happened.
But
So-
it shouldn't be.
Well, that's a moral judgment. And I think that basically marriage...
It's also a biological thing.
Marriage, I think, started as a way of instituting social control. Because
no, when a
Let me
man
finish,
and
let
woman
me
have
finish.
sex,
So I think it
They're
has to do with
bonding.
a form of social control, because it's bad for society to have a bunch of like parentless kids running around. That's why I say that inherently the institution of marriage is about creating a context in which children can be raised. Everything above that, the religiosity, the romance, the legality, the status, is not something the institution of marriage is designed by nature to sustain. And that's why marriage fails. Like, marriage didn't even become a covenant in the Catholic Church until the 16th century. Jesus was not married. The popes do not get married. So, like, religiosity is something that was added to marriage further down the line. And then even further down the line, there was a conflation of two concepts, the love affair and the, like, let's say the family arrangement. And like the love marriage was born. And I think that love marriage has actually done more damage to the institution of marriage than social media and feminism.
I don't know what you're
Well,
saying.
let's move off of the marriage thing here. But look, it's kind of vanilla as a dude in today's day and age to get married. If we want to see a return to traditional values and a return to marriage, I think a couple things need to happen. Divorce needs to be stigmatized, which used to be the case but is no longer the case. That's never going to happen. The other thing is there needs to be a rewriting of marriage laws. If you want to see people start getting married again, get rid of alimony. It's a holdover of days where basically women couldn't go out into the workforce and make their own money, and
It should be
perhaps there
fair.
are some scenarios where alimony may be warranted, but if you want men to start getting married, perhaps get rid of no-fault divorce, or just do a rewriting of the marriage laws where men aren't financially destroyed in the event of divorce. I think that's probably the most realistic way to bring people back towards marriage, and we should probably see conservative politicians pushing for a rewriting of the marriage laws if they value marriage, but it's not clear to me if conservatives really are prepared to do any sort of redo of how marriage or how divorce plays out in the United States. So I think that's the big thing. If you want to see people getting married again, divorce has to be stigmatized on the social level, and they need to rewrite the divorce, marriage laws, divorce laws, and perhaps we need to return to traditional values. But
I agree with that, Brian, personally. I don't know
but
about
the
you.
only one that can really be changed, I don't think that I don't think you're going to convince like hyper liberal people that to return to traditional values. I think people who are conservative or traditional can maintain the status quo within their communities, and you can try to bring people to more traditional values, but it's not like hookup culture is here. So yeah, I don't think there's going to be a huge incentive for men to be dying to get married, especially a lot of men are waking up to the absolute destruction that occurs to them when they do get divorced. So yeah, let's see. Do we have any super chats, Eric?